That we've been in this series is simply called From Here to There, and that's because, as we've said so many times, life is all about movement. When it's not moving, we're not even sure it's alive, and that movement is always constantly moving from here to there. The there becomes a new here, here to there, the there becomes a new here, and this is what life is all about. All of us are born this way. We're born as these little adorable blobs of humanity who are deeply loved, but for all practical purposes are completely useless. I mean, this is true. You know this. Those of us that have had children, they're just useless. They don't do anything. They take giant sucking sound from the time you start going to the doctor, the whole 9 yards. It's just, they take. You know, they can't walk, they can't talk, they can't take care of themselves. You've got to change them, you got to feed them, you got to burp them, you got to put them to bed. But little by little, there's a constant here to there changing that's going on. Sometimes it happens so slowly, but it's happening. And the big deal is, those of you that have never been around this think this is really weird, and I got to admit, it is a little bit weird now that I'm even older looking back. The big deal when your kid can actually roll over by himself. Whoa! I mean, that's better than, the 4th of July. Kid can roll over by himself, and then little by little they begin to get up and they kind of do this motion, they kind of rock. They don't really crawl. They just kind of rock, and that's how then you celebrate that, and then you celebrate those little crawls and those first steps, and then you celebrate the fact they can run or walk, and then eventually they can run. They can't talk, and they by finally have these sounds. They finally put together that first word, which I'm absolutely convinced every time is Daddy, Daddy. Okay, that's the first words. And then they say this, and then they were able to put together several words, and they were able to put together whole sentences. And before long, I was out to breakfast with one of my grandsons who's 6 years old, and we actually had conversation. I was there when he was born, and now we're having conversation, at a table at a restaurant. Life is all about this constant movement from here to there, to here to there, to here to there, and as much as we complain about it, we don't want it to stop, because when it stops, we're dead. Okay? Now, being a follower of Jesus Christ is actually very, very much the same way. Because the Bible says that we as individuals have this attitude of rebellion against God from the get-go. We just have this attitude, that we feel toward God, and we're very, very far from Him as we push Him away and we diss Him. And He says to do X and we do Y, and we don't care. We think we're God of the universe. We think we can handle it ourselves. But then, little by little, we start to sense this thing of emptiness. There's just something like there's something gone. It's like only, you have an 8-cylinder car, it's only operating on half the cylinders. You feel this chug and you don't know exactly what it is. You feel this distance from God, this lack of hope, this lack of purpose, this lack of meaning. What's the reason, to even be alive? This is what the Bible calls this condition of being spiritually dead, which means totally disconnected from God in any real way where you don't experience Him at all. Even though you may go to church, He's over there and you're here. There's a great, huge distance. But in every person's life, there comes a time, sometimes many times, deep in their soul, where they become aware of their need for God. And they really, really desire to connect with Him. And then somehow, through God's divine orchestration, which God takes the responsibility to do, and many of us work alongside Him, but God is really the energy behind this. Somewhere along the line, God orchestrates for us to begin to understand about the cross of Jesus Christ. And it wasn't about starting a religion, it was about changing our lives. It was about us really experiencing the reality and the power of God in our life, that He literally died for our sin. And there comes a time we cross that line of faith and we become a follower of Jesus. And from the very beginning, that was never Jesus' end game. That was just a beginning, a birth, if you will, because when a person becomes a follower of Christ, there are these wonderful little blobs of forgiven, redeemed humanity. But for all practical purposes, they're useless. Because they're still filled with selfishness. They're still filled with things like anger and greed. Very, very demanding. And every day what God is doing is working on a person's life who's a follower of Christ, moving them from here to there in their life to where they become more and more and more in their person like the person of Jesus, and in their purposes like the purpose of Jesus. That's what Jesus is doing in your life if you're a follower of Christ. And it's not going to end until you die. Your next stop is heaven. And the very last day you're on this earth, God is still going to be moving you from here to there and becoming more like Christ. So if you've been a Christ follower for one day or for 30 years, you're both in the same category that God is moving you. And if He's not moving you, something's wrong. Something's wrong. When some of us guys get together, we've been going through the book of 1 Timothy. And And Timothy's a leader of the church in Ephesus. And Paul is writing him, he says, Timothy, let your progress be evident to all. If you're a leader, you should be showing more progress than anybody in moving from here to there and becoming more like Christ. And then, I thought I arrived. You never arrive. You never arrive. That's just the way it is. Every day, God is working in your life to move you from here to there. And then as these growing group of Christ followers get together, they form this thing that has become known as the church. The Bible uses the term the body of Christ. So you have these growing imperfect Christ followers gathering together, and just like individuals, this united and collective force as a group is constantly moving from here to there and carrying out the purposes of God in their community and their world. And if you don't know this yet, this is exactly why the Crossings exists. To be part of that movement of what God is doing in this world. All right. Now in our series, what we've been doing, which we'd like to do a lot of times, is in order to track with some of this stuff we're doing, we'll take something from the Bible, a progression that we read in the Bible. And what we've been following is a group of people in the Old Testament in their development of moving from here to there in their lives. Okay? This group is known as, they go by the children of Israel, the people of God, God-chosen people. But basically, they're the descendants of Abraham who were to play a huge part in the story of God and his redeeming of lost and broken humanity. And again, from the get-go, Abraham was told, your descendants, God says, I'm going to bless your descendants a whole lot, but he makes it really clear, I'm not blessing them just because I love them more than anybody else. I'm not blessing them because they're so special. I'm blessing them because I want to develop out of them a kind of distribution center, if you will, that will distribute my goodness and my reality and my love and my grace to all the rest of the nations in the world. Now, several hundred years after Abraham received this promise, this little group of his descendants had grown to over 1 million people. And as we pick up the Bible in the second book of the Bible, we find that this group is now a slave nation. They're under the fierce tyranny of Egypt. And under the leadership of a man named Moses, God leads them out of Egypt and into a desert to move them to to what is often called the Promised Land, or a new piece of real estate that's going to be there. Now, at this point, when they begin to move out, they are a very ragtag, very disjointed group of people who have lived several hundred years as slaves, and they've totally lost their sense of purpose. They've totally lost their sense of destination and what they're up to and why they even exist. So during their journey across the desert, God reestablishes their identity by giving them what has now become known as the law, capital L, law of Moses. 10 Commandments are a part of the law of Moses. It's a very, very large piece of writing. You can read it in the Old Testament. And what this writing is all about, and what these things that God is telling them is all about, is teaching them how they can relate to God and how they can relate to one another in their movement from here to there, so they can accomplish the purpose of God in their lives as a group of people and as individuals. That's very important to understand this. If you separate the 10 Commandments, if you separate the law of Moses from the purposes of God, it makes no sense. It's really kind of like the constitution of how you'll be able to go about this. And in this morning, I want to look at one small piece. And it talks about this a dozen times, but I want to look at one small piece of this because it very much relates to what we're talking about this morning. Now, the Old Testament, the beginning of the book of Genesis, you've all heard Genesis. Then you have Exodus, Leviticus, that's a weird word, Numbers, Deuteronomy, 5 syllables. It's probably a lot of you don't even think of this, but this is the first 5 books known as the Pentateuch. They're kind of the law of God. They just talk about the beginnings. And I want to read one of these things that God talks about. I'm going to read it in 2 places, one in the book of Deuteronomy and then one in the book of Leviticus. They're both written by Moses. Okay? Deuteronomy, which is the 5th book of the Old Testament. I'm going to just read a couple of verses out of Deuteronomy 24, verse 17 and 18. All right, now here he's talking to them. Listen to what he says. Do not deprive the alien. Now, I know we live in 21st century. Aliens are not... They're not R2-D2, some kind of deals, okay? Aliens means foreign people. People that are not a part of your nation. People that are non-Jewish. People that are not a part of your heritage. Do not deprive the alien or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. And we're going to look at another verse in just a second, but he's saying this. He says, listen, this is going to be very important. If you don't understand what I've done for you, then you're not going to have the right attitude toward the people around you. You're going to think it's all about you. You're going to create some kind of exclusive little club. Oh, God loves me. Well, God does love you. But the truth is he loves a lot of other people. So he's saying, hey, listen, guys, I want you to remember as you move through and as I'm using your lives, I want you to remember that you were once slaves. You were once hopeless. You were once lost as could be. I redeemed you. So when you look at other people like these foreigners and these aliens, keep these things in mind. Okay? To the book of Leviticus. Leviticus, which is the third book. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, of the Old Testament. All right, now listen to this. Leviticus chapter 19, starting in verse 33. 2 verses, 33 and 34. When an alien lives with you in your land, do not mistreat him. The alien living with you must be treated as one of your native born. Love him as yourself, for you were aliens in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. Kind of saying the same thing again, but what he wraps in here is he says, you're to love them as yourselves. You're not going to treat them as lowlifes. Remember, you once were aliens in Egypt. Don't ever forget where you came from, because if you ever forget who you were, you'll start getting very pious and start looking down your long pious nose at all these losers down below you. So he says, don't do that. Now, what he's saying here, as you read some other things in here, is he was saying that your tendency is going to be, here's going to be your tendency, that when you get to your land and you get established there in this wonderful, wonderful land that I'm going to be giving to you, you're going to begin to get all inward. You're going to begin to think that God's blessing of you is just because you're so special. It's just because he loves you more than anybody else. And you're going to become an exclusive club of insiders who shut other people out. Don't do that. Never forget where you came from, that once you were the outsiders, once you were the ones without hope, once you were the ones without peace, once you were the ones without meaning and purpose. You were slaved. I reached down and redeemed you and gave you a future you didn't even deserve. But I reached down and I did this for you. And now he's saying, what I want you to do as my people, I want you to work with me in doing the exact same to others. I want you to be radically inclusive of the outsiders, because I'm as crazy in love with them as I am with you. They're precious. I want to redeem them, and I want to restore them too. Now, as we hear this, there's something inside of us that I'll go, yeah, what's your point? Tell me something I don't know. Yeah, this is so right. But from our earliest times as kids, we learned to put people in boxes, and we learned to draw lines, accepting some and excluding others. And as I'm saying this right now, you know your boxes, and you know your lines, and you know the people that are excluded, and you know the people that are included. Probably wouldn't take long if I asked you to write them all down. At school, we learn there's the popular kids, and there's the unpopular kids. There's the cool kids and the uncool kids. Now, when I was in high school in California, maybe a little bit different than here, but also it's several generations ago, there were the jocks, there were the surfers, there were the nerds, and there were the lowriders. Now, the lowriders had nothing to do with how you wore your pants. Okay? Lowriders is where your car set, how far your car set off the ground. And so there were all these particular groups. There were those in school who were preparing for a future in the academic world. Then there were those who just took floater classes, who were absolutely certain were going to make a career out of driving a Frito-Lay truck the rest of their life, because they didn't really care that much about, the brainiac kind of stuff. Everybody knew their place, and the seating arrangement at lunch reinforced what the boxes were, and these lines were very seldom crossed. After graduating and getting into the real world, the lines get drawn even deeper, dividing people by economics, dividing people by education and political preferences, moral practices, religious beliefs. Each one of these groups circling their wagons and keeping everybody else out and feeling very good about themselves. And one of the very best groups of people at doing this over the years, or the worst group of doing this, if you want to use that language, is the church. The church. Those who are so grateful, honestly, for the redeeming power that God has done in their own lives, who love to sing about it, who love to talk about it with one another as they circle their wagons and join their arms and sing Kumbaya. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I wouldn't want to say anything about that. But in the process, who completely forget that there are people beyond the walls who are once just like they were, who are desperately in need, just like they once were. They're in need of the redeeming and the restoring power of a loving God, and they forget all about this. By the way, this was a problem from the very beginning of the church. This isn't a 21st century problem. This is from the very, very beginning, because as the church started, it was primarily Jewish. And the non-Jewish people were the ones who became the early followers of Jesus. And then, the Jewish people were, and as the non-Jewish people began to follow Jesus, there was major turf wars going on. Each group tried to circle the wagons to exclude the other group because they weren't good enough. They weren't on the inside. There were divisions then between the rich and the poor. There were divisions between the slaves and the free. There were exclusions over personal preferences. Everybody that thought one way would get over here, and everybody thought the other way would get over here. This was the church that Jesus gave his life for. These things are one of the reasons that Paul wrote the letters that he did. The New Testament, the second half of the New Testament, is primarily letters written by the Apostle Paul to these churches that were going through these issues, and he deals with a lot of these issues. And so he wrote them to remind them of their purpose, of their mission, of why they were even together. And one such letter was the book of 2 Corinthians, which is a church that had so much division going on. They were dividing over everything. And so he said, I've got to fix this. He wrote them two letters, 1 Corinthians and 2 Corinthians. Corinth was a city in Greece. And so he wrote this young church, and he said, I've got to remind you of the overshadowing 30,000-foot purpose, because if you miss this, you're going to keep excluding people and pulling the wagons together. And I just want to read these verses out of 2 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 17. I'm just going to pretty much read them because I think you can get it as we read through this. All right, starting in verse 17. If anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. He used to be spiritually dead, now he's spiritually alive. He used to be disconnected to God, now he's connected with God. That starts a whole new reality in his life. The old is gone, the new has come. All this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave, this is so important, and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. You know what reconciliation is? It's bringing two opposing parties together. You reconcile them. He says, you got reconciled to God. You were once distant from God. Don't ever forget that, because now I want to use you to work with me in reconciling people to me. Okay, church, this is one of the things you're supposed to do. Here's the point, that God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting men's sins against them. And get this, if you say, I wonder what it means in Greek. Same thing. What do it means in Hebrew? Same thing. What do it means in Aramaic? Same thing. Got it? Here we go. And he has committed to us, the church, the message of reconciliation. He didn't give this to government. He didn't give this to education. Sometimes people get so upset, well, the government isn't talking about God. It isn't their job to talk about God. It's the church's job. Well, they're not teaching all this stuff about God in the schools. I'm actually kind of glad that happens because it's the church's job. It isn't education's job. Let them teach us math. And have an honoring of God, yes. But the church is the one who's to bring the message of reconciliation. And he wraps it up in verse 20. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. He was saying this to a group of people who were excluding people. He says, what are you doing excluding people? Don't you remember where you came from? Don't you remember who you were? Don't you remember the big picture of what I'm doing in your life? Come on, church, get over it. Get over it. I got over it with you, and I redeemed your life. And I'm asking the church to join with me in doing the very same thing. This overriding principle is the driving force of the church. The church is to be a purpose-driven people who are radically inclusive of people that Jesus is absolutely crazy in love with, because when the church loses this, the church stops being the church. And it simply goes down to nothing more than an exclusive, members-only club who bask in all the perks, but lose their soul. That's critical because it could happen to any church and it could happen to us. 2 weeks ago, as we were mentioning a few minutes ago, 11 of us boarded an airplane right here in Orlando. 5 of us were from the Crossings. 6 were from other churches, a couple from Dallas, one from Washington, D.C. area, several here from Orlando, to head down to La Paz, Bolivia. It's a people group that, to be quite honest with you, was totally off my radar. I don't think I ever even thought about them before. They live on a different continent, lesser continent. It's winter right now. Who ever heard of having winter in this, in July? Okay? They speak another language. They dress differently. They live very, very differently. And quite frankly, they're really just not a whole lot like me. But down there were several groups of Christ followers who wanted to start new churches. So we, in conjunction with the missions organization, E3 Partners, volunteered to go down there and join them to help them do this. When I left, I do what I frequently do whenever I go someplace. I specifically ask God to take me where I've never been before because I want to be in a constant journey every day of my life moving from here to there. That's why I thank God. Every day of my life, my best days and years are ahead of me because God's going to keep on taking me. So I said, okay, God, here we go. I'm setting up, this environment's kind of weird for me. I want you to take me and I want to experience a part of you and a way of you working and thinking that I've never experienced before. On the first Sunday we were there, we divided into 3 teams. That we were going to be going into 3 different parts of the city to be engaging in some of the things that we were going to be doing with these churches. And in the neighborhood that I was in, we did a prayer walk, which meant we walked through the neighborhoods of the homes that we were going to be going to over the next week. And because I don't speak the language, what we had with us on this prayer walk, we kind of divided up. We had some nationals, and then I had an interpreter with me. That gal there that you see there on the left is Geraldine, I can't say her name, Jerry to me, okay? Don't try to call her that, but that works for me. Okay, and she was my interpreter. The other 2 guys there, these are 2 nationals that I was with to help train. And then I had an interpreter because I would be useless, without her. So we began to walk around, and the guy all the way on your right, Adrian, he said, "Hey, I know this gal that has this little store." Now I called it a convenience store. It was about 25% of this stage, which is a little thing you just kind of put your head in through, then you walk in, you kind of turn around to get what you want, and then hopefully you pay and go out. Okay. So she said, "I know this gal Maria." Maria's about 50 years old. I've seen her every now and then because he lived in the neighborhood. Let's go talk to her. I said, "Talk to her. Come on, man. She's busy. There's people in her little cubicle thingy dealy, and I just talk about Jesus and that." Anyway, so he says, "Come on, let's do it." So I go in there, and he introduces me as the resident gringo. That I was down here, and of course you feel so stupid, you can't speak the language, you feel so small and insignificant, and I'm thinking, this is dumb, people are trying to buy whatever they're trying to buy, I don't even know what they're trying to buy, but they're trying to buy it, and so she's talking to them, and she's taking change, and so Adrian says, "Well, Ron, just tell us a little bit about why you're here," okay, and Geraldine translates to me, because he doesn't speak Spanish, and so I began telling the story of Jesus in this convenience store with people behind me and waiting, and things over the corner, and bread and everything, happening, and all this, and we kind of get to the end, and I tell her the story of Jesus, and I said, "Would you be interested in finding out more about that?" "Yes, I would." So right there, we drew the thing that we affectionately call the fix. A little drawing, did it right there on the counter with her on a bag, and she comes to Christ right there over that counter with people waiting to buy bread. Wow, God, Ooh. I was going to exclude her. But I think maybe you just taught me a lesson here. So the next day, we take off and we go up to this particular door. And I want to show you this picture only because this is what the door is. Don't think it's like a front door like here. This is the way the homes are. They have a wall with metal doors. And then inside that is kind of a little courtyard, and behind that is the house. So when you pound it, you bust you up your knuckles. A lot of them pick up stones and they hit them on the... because you don't want to bust up your knuckles pounding on these metal doors. So anyway, we went to this one particular metal door. Those are 2 of the guys that I worked with. And so this lady comes out, is about 60 years old, Lucia. And she comes out, and we start to talk to her. She's about 60. Then her son, this is one of the most saddest, I don't want to say ugly because of the way his face is put together, but ugly because of the way his countenance was. Just an angry, I thought, oh man, this is kind of scary, So we step out into the street, that very street right there. Most of them were just dust and rock. And we stepped out there, and he's telling me how awful everybody is, and he's just angry and he's mean and all, especially the religious people. Oh, you religious people, you're the ones that really do it. You steal from us, you take from us. He goes on and on and on and on. I'm there thinking, all right, God, I got to bail on this. This is a waste of my time. Take care of this person somehow. Just use somebody else other than me. I can't even speak the language. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how to back out of this conversation. And finally, just for some reason, I just said, okay, Geraldo, I agree. I'm saying this through a translator. I agree. There's a lot of bad people around. There's a lot of people that do really bad. How about you? You ever done anything bad? Suddenly his countenance changes. I said, there's a God that really loves you. Let me show you something. So I began to draw out this little thing. And then I said, is this something you'd like to do? This little thing that shares about Jesus Christ, is this something you'd like to do? And he said, yes. And his mother said, yes. Now, in that culture, because it's very difficult, you don't know what they're saying, I don't normally do this, but I said, I'm going to repeat a prayer. Don't repeat it back to me, but you repeat it to God, and the translator says it to him. If this is what you want to do, you say it to God. Okay? So I start repeating this, and then it goes to the translator, and then I hear Geraldo say something. And I start to say something, and the translator goes something, and Geraldo says, and then Geraldo just takes off. I go, I'm the leader here, okay? I'll tell you what to say to God, And so then my translator starts interpreting to me what he's saying, backwards. I'm just standing there, not believing what I'm hearing. God, I am such a bad, evil my soul is so dirty. I just need you to clean me up. Thank you that you died for me. Come into my life. Change my life. This is going on as we're on the dust of this street. And then the mother does exactly the same thing. And when we say amen, we look up. And I will never forget this. I don't know if I've seen a happier face in my whole life. I saw this guy for the next 2 days, and he never could take this huge grin off of his face. Later that day, as we were walking up the hill, he was working on the top of his house. And by the way, they're flat, and so he's just, he's working on this. And he stands up there, and he's working, and he sees us coming, and he raises his hands like this with his biggest smile on his face, and he says, my soul is clean. That was a guy I was going to exclude. The next day, we visited them, and we did this kind of in their little area there. And don't I look huge? Man, They're very small people, by the way. I'm not standing on anything. Okay? And that's Luisa. There with and they're in the middle. That's Geraldo, second from your right there, over there next to Jerry. And then that's the uncle who's on my right, who came to Christ too. And that little family are now following Jesus. Well, I'm just going, this is just too good. And so I kept working with these people, with the trainers. And so the last day I was there, I said to them, I knocked on this door, I said, okay, you take it away. Let's forget a translator. You just talk to them and you share the gospel. Because I've been working with them for 3 or 4 days to be able to share the gospel. I say, you just do it. And the whole thing went in Spanish. For all I know, they were talking about Porky Pig and prayed to Elmer Fudd. I don't know. I do not know, because I couldn't understand one word. But at the end of that, this entire family, as you'll see up here in this balcony, all prayed to receive Christ. All of them prayed to receive Christ. I was going to exclude them too. God took me on a journey from here to there to realize I'm really a person who excludes a lot of people. I don't mean to do it. I'm a pretty nice guy. I don't go around vengeful and angry and hateful, but I just do. And I got, God, thank you for taking me from here to there. Thank you for expanding me. Thank you for showing me things I hadn't seen before. And by the way, I'm not the only one. Team, why don't you come up here? I want you to see the rest of these guys. Because the rest of these guys talked as well. And I want them to tell you a little bit of their story. Let me set this up for you real quick here. Because every one of these people, just like me, had a here to there kind of experience. And the way we all ended up getting down there was there were originally only going to be 3 of us, as you well know. And then there ended up at the very last minute being 5 of us. Because 2 days before we were going to leave, 3 days before we were going to leave, I got a message that not all of them could go from one of the other churches here in town. And so they said, "Do you have anybody? It's all paid for. Have anybody that they have to have a passport, by the way, because we don't have time to get passports." And so 2 of them here were able to get their passports in really, really, really short order. And so we're all here. And I just wanted you to hear some of it. Robbie, who was, Robbie, where were you? You were supposed to be leading worship last Sunday. You skipped out, I hear.
It was the weather was so nice.
I know, it was. So Robbie and I were down there together, and I just want some of these guys to just tell you some of their experiences, because they're very much just like you and me. Go ahead, Robbie.
Well, I know for me it was a little difficult, because I've been on a few different mission trips around the world, and I've been extremely fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. But this particular one, I was a little bit skeptical, because my previous ones I'd been on, I had shared the gospel, and it was an amazing experience, and I would get to see the life change, but then I would leave and go somewhere else and share the gospel. I didn't really get the follow-up, so I don't really know what has happened in these other on these other trips that I went on. So I kind of went in a little bit more skeptical than anything. I wanted to know that these people were going to be taken care of once the Americans were gone. And what I learned while I was there was that I got to work with the nationals, the translators, and then the people that lived in those different communities. And I kind of got to see the transition from me leading at the beginning of the week to by the end of the week. I really got to see the nationals and the locals and the translators really just taking it and just really encouraging them throughout the week. Like, this time you're going to share. This time you're going to share your story. You're going to share the gospel. And I'm just going to watch it. And I'm just going to be the awkward person in the corner smiling, watching this cool thing happen in front of me.
But I want to tell you what I think was really cool is right at the very beginning, when you showed me some of your pictures back, there's one right here of you actually having your own little group of sharing the gospel through a translator.
Yeah, exactly. I had some people that I was sharing the gospel, and then sure enough, like, my translator was obviously translating everything, and I had like people on the ground, and I was writing it out, like how we learned here in the classes that you can take with Ron about sharing the gospel, which I highly encourage if we do it again, to take it. Like, these are my translators were over there on my right. And then there were a few people just sitting on the stairs, and I was just kind of drawing it out in chalk. So if you go all over the city of Alto Inca Yojeta in Bolivia, you'll see a bunch of gospels written out everywhere. And it doesn't rain very often, so hopefully it's going to stay there for a while. But it was just really cool to be a part of, and to share that, and then to watch them take over throughout the week was just really encouraging, to know that they're being shepherded and being cared for as well, long after we're gone, which is amazing.
That is so cool. And I just love, we'd come back during the day and they'd show us the pictures that they took. And this next one actually shows you just these people just gathered together and prayed with you right there on the street.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
To actually become followers of Christ.
Yeah, that's Alberto. He's a mechanic over there. And we got to share with him. And his eyes light up. We kind of saw him. It was a similar story to what Ron was talking about. He kind of looked like he didn't have hope in anything. And then we kind of shared with him about God and how God loves him and God cares for him. And like, his demeanor instantly started changing. And then he started praying for us as we were on our journeys from America. And it was just really cool to just be able to share a story with him from the Bible, because we would share the gospel and then we would share a story and be like, how does this relate to you? What can you take away from this? So that they really processed it and really digested it while we were down there. So again, it was just really cool to kind of see the light turn on and to see the life change occur instantly, and then to just know that it's sticking because it's causing wrinkles in his brain, to make him think.
And we thought it'd be kind of fun to show you some of the statistics of actually what happened when we were there, because we just keep track of this just so we can know, not so we can brag about it, but so we can just brag on God and with the opportunities He gave us. And this next slide just shows what happened when we were down there.
Yeah, exactly. We had 398 people, as you guys can see, that we shared the gospel to. 278 received Christ, and the coolest thing I think is how many people were trained, to be able to share their story and to be able to share different Bible stories, because that's gonna multiply itself, dividends on over, which is really cool. And then to be a part of 2 churches that got started in the communities, I mean, you can't put a price tag or a number on that, on the life change that's going to occur because of that. So it's just cool to be a part of and to kind of watch God do His thing. Like we were talking about how God worked on steroids during that week. It was really cool to just see.
And on that last day, you actually you took a shot of all the nationals that were sharing the gospel in this one room that we were all together.
Yeah, exactly. We had an eye clinic going on, and after they would get their glasses, we were like, okay, now we have a couple people from your community. Then we'd give them a name, and then they would go through the story. But what was really cool was that they were doing it in so many different ways. There was like one person with an EvangeCube sharing with a cube. One person was going through the Bible. One person was drawing it out in different ways, and it was just really cool to see how they did it so often that it's like they could do it like the back of their hand by the time we were gone. So it was just incredible.
That is so cool. Now, we divided into separate groups. The five of us were, three of us were in one group. I think they took the top three and put us in the same group.
I think so, yeah.
Then they put Marcy in another group, and they put Joel in another group. Okay. And so, Marcy, tell us about yours.
Well, it's interesting because the group I went to, we're supposed to go in with E3 and partner with the church. And the weird thing is that we went to this place called Tapia Chulio, and I think I said it right. I haven't said it right all week when I was there. And our assignment was to be a part of the church there, help train the nationals like Robbie's talking about, and obviously go around door to door. But we faced a problem. The church at Tapia Chulio, the little village we went to, didn't want to participate. They said, we're too busy, we don't got time. It's so funny you mentioned all that stuff about exclusion. They kind of said, not for us right now, and we don't have time for this. So I was a little bit discouraged, and so was our group. So we had to go and try to find other Christ followers to help run this eye clinic, help share the gospel. We didn't have anybody. So me and two other Americans, and then our translators, walked around Tapia Chulio, and then we went on a prayer walk like Ron talked about. And once on Sunday, and we went on a prayer walk, and we saw this lady at one of these shops like Ron talked about. It was just a little bay door that's open, and her name was Dona Hortensia. Walked over there, we prayed with her, and you could just see in someone's eyes, and we do it here, we see it here, when someone doesn't have peace, someone's hurting. So we asked her, hey, do you want anything, could we pray for you about anything? We're just here praying for people of Tapia Chulio. And she's like, yeah, could you pray for my business? Could you pray for my two kids? Because, they're running wild. And just for my family. And you could just see this woman's sadness. So we finished praying for her, and we say, hey, could we use your business to run one of our eye clinics? Because we need it, because we would naturally do it at the church, but we had to use her business. So we thought, oh my gosh, we got her business. She said yes. She's like, okay, you can use our business. Great. Well, we kept running into problems. At least my group did. No church, so we had to find a church. So next day, Monday, we go to Dona Hortensia. Hey, Dona Hortensia, can we talk? Because I wanted to follow up with her, share the gospel with her. And she kept dodging us. So I'm busy. Sorry, I can't meet. Sorry. Hey, do you remember we having an eye clinic? Is it today? No, it's Wednesday. Is it tomorrow? No, it's Wednesday. Constantly just having this issue. And so we were a little bit discouraged, but we kept persisting. And it's funny how God's just so ahead of us. And if we just catch up to him, we're going to see a lot of neat things that he has in store. And so the next day, me and a translator and actually a guy that lives in Tapia Chulio, his name is Rolando, we're walking around, and on the back of Tapia Chulio, there's this village called Yacasa. And I want to show you this. It's almost like a canyon. It's crazy. You're walking back there, and then it's just, and I'm afraid of heights, so I was freaking out. On the other side, I don't know if you could see that little green house there. That's actually the city town hall, Yacasa, which is just about 80 people there. And so as me and Rolando and Osvi, which is my translator, we're walking, we see this woman, and I'm talking, she has her baby strapped to her back, and she's carrying this like 40 to 50 pound bag of just veggies in a bag, in this other bag, and she looks tired. So Rolando's like, hey, can we help her? Like, well, we'll just see where this goes. So we go, we help her, and we go down, all the way down, from the top of Chulio. I mean, it's a massive hike down. I don't know how this woman did it with the baby on her back and these two bags, but Ron was like, well, she's probably done it before. And like, you're right, she has. And I'm thinking, oh, this is so heavy. My wife. And so we go all the way down there, and we're like, where's this leading? So we end up talking. The woman's actually a Christ follower. Her brother led her to Christ. Like, well, you got to be kidding me, right? So we go all the way across over there, and we meet her brother, Lewis. And then you can't see, and I should have brought the picture, but right over there, right to the left of that little piece of land, we meet her brother, and he's working on that land. And we tell him and we meet him, and we tell him what E3 is doing. And he says, well, me and this other guy, we're a pastor here. And today, we just got the deed to our church. And it's crazy that our target place was Tapia Chulio, but God kept pushing us into this unknown. We just kept stepping into, well, okay, God, we're just going to go here. Okay, God. And we kept seeing issues. But God says, hey, there's a church I want you to be a part of, and it's right here in Yacasa. And it was crazy. So the next picture is of me praying with the people. Now this is a beautiful picture. Lewis is right there, the guy with right beside me, and then there's Jason, who's obviously American, and then and then the three Osby's that got the long hair. He was one of the guys that who was a translator, and then that's Martine. He and Lewis are co-pastoring this place. Now she is a woman that's of that little village of just farmers. And the coolest thing was, they're in Amaran. Was that the right word? Amaran. And it's a certain dialect. They don't have any written language. So we had to triple translate stuff. And we share the gospel. And when Robbie said it's so powerful, and when Ron and all of us are talking about the gospel, it's just this little thing that we've taught here at the church multiple times is, here's God, here's you, here's God, and Jesus bridges this gap, and he brings you to God. And I just saw that man, after we trained him on how to share the gospel, he just sat at the end of his pew, no lie, for 10 minutes, just staring at this little note card of Bible verses and how to share the gospel in awe. So God answered our prayer there. But the next day, we had more issues. We had to go around, and Tapia Chulu is our target. Couldn't find any church people there, so we kept going door to door, and guess what? Miss Hortensia kept dodging me. Now it's Tuesday. She thinks, you guys are having the eye clinic today? No, Mr. Hortensia, we're having it the next day, Wednesday. And she dodges. So I said, hey, we'll be back Wednesday. Wednesday comes around for our eye clinic. We've been telling the whole village of Tapia Chulio, hey, we're going to have an eye clinic here. We're going to have an eye clinic here. And we get there 3 o'clock. We stay right in front of her business that's on this main road. 3 o'clock comes around. We go to her business. The shop's closed. Like, you got to be kidding me, right? How are we going to do this? So me and Osvaldo, the translator with the long hair, is like, hey, let's go talk to Dona Hortensia. So we go talk to her, and she's just chilling in her other shop. Chilling, just eating, drinking coffee. And we're like, hey, Dona Hortensia, 3 o'clock, remember? Oh, yeah, I'll be there in a couple of minutes. Translation to Latin, in an hour. Okay? Latino, whenever you hear someone say, I'll be there in 5, no, they'll be there in an hour, okay? And so for a full hour and 15 minutes, we're doing an eye clinic right in front of her shop with the base down and just the glasses on the concrete. And so what we do, we test them so they could read. They're just reading glasses. We have them read something, read a verse in the Bible, and then share the gospel with them. And finally, Dona Hortensia came. She opens the bay door, and I'm like, God. And by this time, I am not feeling well, because after this, I was out for like a day and a half. Probably shouldn't eat a lot of the stuff I ate, but one in Rome. And and so I'm talking, we get there, and God's like, and I'm like, God, I'm feeling horrible right now. And this woman, I've been praying all week for this woman to come to know you, Jesus. She's in pain. She's not feeling peace. And so somehow God opened the door, and I said, hey, let's go get her. Let's go get her. So we got her. We sat her down. We did the eye test with her. She finally was able to see and read be able to read now because of the glasses. And then we shared the gospel with her. I had her read Romans 8 through 10. And we said, hey, you want to pray to receive Christ, to receive the peace that surpasses understanding that you want? She said, yes. So this is a picture of us. And I posted one on Facebook, which is beautiful. I wanted you guys to see her face. This woman, that's Rolando, a gentleman who lives there, and the other aside from us is Pablo, one of the translators. And on the other picture that we got to see, her hands are open in a posture of receiving. And so for me, as learning from, God just said, Marcia, every time you hit a roadblock, you keep pushing through, because I'm on the other side just waiting for you to catch up. Just waiting. It's a test of faith on my end to say, okay, God, I really trust you, and I'm going to keep pursuing what you have for me. It's literally moving from here to there. Yeah. For me, it was a great lesson.
Yeah, I think that so much of learning and walking with God is, when is a door open and when is a door closed and when is it just cracked, and you're just always talking to God and say, God, now you just don't really know. Now, Hannah and I were on the same team. We're on the good team, right? Yes. Yeah, number one. Yeah. Okay. Tell us about some of your experiences there. Hannah was one of the ones that just ended up going in you had about 2 days' notice?
2 days notice. Yeah. So 2 days notice, I was at work, and Ron and Marcia came in and offered for me to go Bolivia, and I was like, all right, we'll see where this goes. So I texted my boss, and it all got worked out. It shouldn't have gotten worked out, but it got worked out, and on my way to Bolivia. Had no idea where Bolivia was, don't speak Spanish, all of that. And so we get there, and I'm like, all right, so God set this up. He must want me on here for some reason, or he's just giving me a good vacay, like something. But so we get there, and they split us in our teams, and they give us a translator, each of us a translator. I'm like, oh no, this means I'm talking a lot, which is not good for anybody. So I'd been on mission trips before to Haiti a couple times, and I work with kids, or I'll help run the eye clinic, or I'll do any type of group work that doesn't involve me sharing the gospel in any way other than through action, because I'm a great support. But so they tell us we're going to go door to door and share the gospel with an EvangeCube or with like a piece of paper. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is terrifying. I can't do this. Why me? Why would they offer this to me? I should have told them I couldn't do this. It's great. So our first day there, we're doing a prayer walk. And in fact, the group I was with, which was from the home, the father and the mother of the home that we were trying to start a church in, they didn't take me for a prayer walk. They took me to this family's house of a woman who was helping them cook at their house. And she has a bunch of daughters, and they're having family issues. So the first day I was there, I didn't actually end up sharing the gospel. I had a counseling session with the family, and it didn't go well. So I actually ended up connecting, though, caring a lot about these girls I was talking to who are all in their teens. So I was like, this is what I do at home. This is great. God, if this is why I'm here every day, all right. But so I had this counseling session with them where I was trying to figure out just how to get them to relate to each other. They were all Christian. They were just having troubles. It didn't work out. That was it. It was like, all right, failed attempt. So then we go back the next day, and I'm with my translator, Jota. Just me and him, and then usually one national would tag along with us. It was different every day for us. And they're like, all right, so now we're going to go share the gospel. I'm like, oh, great. I can't do this. But God sent me here, it seems like, so I'll try. And so we go out, and if you can bring up the next picture, the first one I sent you, that's a picture of a door. It's a bad picture of a door. But this was like the most intimidating thing in the world to me. And the whole time I'm just thinking, he should have sent somebody else for this. You know, send me on another trip doing something else. But he should have sent somebody else for this to build a church in this way. I should come at like phase 3 when we have a children's ministry. But this is wrong. Or you need a coffee shop run or something. But so Holta's like, well, where do you want to go? And I'm like, you run, boss. I'm like support system here. You tell me where to go. So we start on this street called L Street. And lo and behold, every door we walk by, I'm like, maybe he'll skip this one. But no, he goes up and he knocks. And every time you go to a door, they say, hi, this is my friend Hannah from America. She would like to share her story with you. And lo and behold, every door, you share the gospel and I share my life. 2 things that are super uncomfortable for me to share, and yet I've been a Christian for my life, my whole life. So long story short, I guess, well, that first day that we were sharing the gospel, we ended up on L Street the entire day. I shared the gospel with Holta over 18 times, and they all accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. And it was great because it was so clear that it wasn't us, because he's shy and I'm awkward. And so it was just, I can't explain to you how incredible it was that God divinely set up that these people's lives, although they seem so different, and I excluded myself from sharing the gospel, pieces of their lives fit with mine. You know, pieces of Baldomero, who's this 55-year-old welder who works every day of his life, somehow fit with my life, and yet that connected us to Jesus and the gospel. Crazy. It doesn't make sense. I would have excluded me from telling him. I would have excluded me from telling the gospel, period. But it worked. And so every day for the rest of the week, we went back to L Street, and we just visited them, these same people, Baldomero, Maria, Fidelia, so many people every day, and we'd bring them a Bible one day, and then the next day we'd visit and we'd eat and we'd share a Bible story and we'd talk about their life. And it just built sharing the gospel into this incredibly genuine relationship with all of us. So what's the next picture here?
Well, this is just the home you're going to talk about this. There was this home that wanted to, and we were together on this. They're actually opening their home to start a church. It's really cool. It's not a home like probably most of us live in. You think, oh, they must have a huge mansion. No, a little concrete floor living room. But the next picture just actually shows us a little bit of that living room, that it was like that they were willing to open up their home, and this is just one empty morning. But then the next day, that room got filled.
Yeah, so in the middle of the week, we had an eye clinic. That was part of our way of talking to people. It's like, hey, this is my friend from America. Oh, also in 2 days, we're going to have an eye clinic, so you can get reading glasses if you want. So we set it up in the middle of the week, and it was this point in the week for me where I had, for the last 2 days, really tried to have faith in God that, all right, if I go out with Hota and we just speak Christ, that's it. We just talk about Christ and put ourselves on the line, then maybe he'll do something. And so this day happened, and it was incredible because all these people we talked to, it felt like hundreds, showed up, and we get to be friendly and say, hey, this church has all these glasses for you if you want to read these Bibles we're giving to you, and you put them on their face, and it's so wonderful and like intimate and personal. And then when they were done finding the right glasses for them, they'd go over into the corner there, and a bunch of the nationals, the people who actually will be running that church, shared the gospel with them or talked to them more. And it was just wonderful, this moment of seeing like, oh my goodness, in 2 days, just being bold, just understanding that the gospel is really why we're here, is why it's the cornerstone of my life, and I believe it'll be the cornerstone of their life. It started a church in a living room.
Yeah, and here's kind of a picture of just some of those people that are going to be part of this new church that are just sitting there in this living room. Go ahead and bring that one up, Josh, if you can do that. There they are. And it's interesting, there's a younger generation too. This was really interesting. They were probably, every one of them was younger than I am, but they could be pretty old and be younger than I am. But that group up there was pretty cool to see that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a real here to there experience for you.
It was wonderful. It taught me a lot. I think more than anything, it just got me excited to come back here, not on a high, but with a new romance with what the gospel does, and understanding that God's a multitasker with it. Like every time we shared it, connected to someone's life, it brought them hope. It reminded me I was sharing my life of everything that Jesus' life, Jesus' death does in it. And then at the end, by the end of the week, there's just so many stories of how that house, which is now a church, was taking care of the community. We fed a family that didn't have food. People were reading, and they hadn't read in years because they couldn't see, and they knew that it came from that house, which was something God had set up for them. Like, it was just wild.
Joel was also on, he was a third tier down, wasn't he?
Yeah.
First us, then you, and then Joel. Yeah. All right, Joel.
My story was a little different. I can scoot up a little bit.
You got to turn them.
Turn the mic on there, Joel.
God?
I love you.
Yeah, my story is a little bit different. Saturday, we got to meet everyone we were going to be working with. They came to our hotel, and we got to meet them. And I was excited because right away, my team was, we're going to be planning a church this week. And I'm like, yes, this is awesome. So right away, I'm like, great, I've been doing ministry for a while now, like 7 years. Like, I want to hear their plan. Like, what do they have in store? Like, I'm so excited. So I'm asking, like, these new, and there was 4 of them, 4 leaders of this new church that's going out, like, what their plan is. And if anything, moving me here to there was definitely faith-based. Because, again, I've been doing ministry for a while, so I'm asking them their plan. And I'm like, so have you talked to anyone yet? And they're like, no. And I was like, okay. I was like, do we have a plan for a building? No. I was like, okay. It was like, have you guys ever started a church before? No. I was like, great. And I was like, so what's the plan? Like, how are we? And they're like, oh, the plan is you guys. And I was like, and in my mind, I'm like, these are the worst church planners ever. Like, and how do you tell that to them? Like, I'm like, and to add it on, we did find out that they actually have a piece of land. We went on a prayer walk on that Sunday, and this is their piece of land. It's a piece of crap, that land. To say it nicely, it's 100 different levels. It looks like there's been 100 different buildings on that piece of land because all there is different rocks and stones all over the place. That little kind of building on the side is where they're going to be meeting. That is no bigger than any of our children's classrooms in the back. And that's where they're going to start meeting, hopefully to build a church. And to find out, and so that's another thing. I'm just like, man, these guys, they have no clue what they're doing. God can't work with this because they haven't put any effort, it didn't seem like. And to find out, even talking to one of the leaders, 40 years ago, they had tried to plant a church before, and in this area where a lot of Mara Indians were, and they actually got ran out of town. So I'm getting in this environment, they're like, wait, you got ran out of town before, I'm white, they're definitely running me out of town. And they have no clue what they're doing.
And there's no church in this community at all, right?
There's never been a church ever in this community. Yeah. This is about 30 minutes from where we're staying in our hotel. They call this the Valley. To get there, Ron said it was like a bowl. You went straight up a mountain for about almost 30 minutes and down it one. So what they call a valley is actually on the side of the mountain. It's very hilly, so it's flat hill, flat hill, flat hill, all the way down. And so I was a little nervous. I didn't think it was going to work, but I was part of the team. And we had the smallest team, so we're just like, all right, I'll just do it. So we go door to door just like everyone else, and just God's sense of humor, the first person I meet, a mom and her son, and the kid's name is Orlando. And I'm like, that's really weird. And actually lead them to Christ. And I start discipling them right away. A family who said they didn't have time to talk, it turned into an hour plus of us talking and just going over Bible verses. And I also got a chance to do what I do best, and I got to play soccer with the locals. They have a soccer field in the middle, which is funny that they even find a piece of land to put a soccer field because it's not very flat. It's not the best piece of land, but I find these kids, and they see that I'm American, and automatically they want to play with me, so I started playing with them. My feet are still sore from this day because all it is dirt, and as you can see, rocks everywhere, and a lot of these kids are playing barefoot. And it's a little sad. They have one soccer ball in their community, and it's not in the best shape, as you could see. What that is an inside of a soccer ball, and it's very flat. But I got to interact with the community, me and my translator and a local, and the community just got to really see this church in a different light because they had never heard of this church before. So we got to do that, and that was awesome. Another thing that I am good at, and it's what I do for a living, is eyeglasses. So we got to do that as well. And that day, 92 people came to know Jesus.
Wow.
I think it's interesting. You don't realize it. We just go down to get glasses all the time. You go to Walgreens if you don't want to get a prescription. You just get 1 or 1.25 or 1 and just get them. But these people have read they have nowhere to get glasses. And that is just the look on their face when they can suddenly read. I mean, just tears start coming down their eyes. It's just pretty incredible.
Oh, yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I mean, I haven't received that many hugs before in my life, and I'm like, these are just readers. Like, it's not a big deal. Yeah. And to them, it was huge.
But by the end of the week, something happened.
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, our team alone saw about 150 people come to know Jesus, and we actually got to start a church. And this is a picture. That's Friday morning. We had the first church service in Chinchaya ever. About 20-something people there. I wouldn't say it was the best ran service.
Did they go long?
Yeah, and a lot of songs I didn't understand, but that's because they were all in Spanish. And people were very disruptive. Because we're meeting in this tiny space of about maybe 10 feet. But a church service started, and I'll never forget that day because it happened. Horrible plans, if plans at all. And they've tried before and failed, but somehow God came through, and we started a church.
Those are here to their experiences that we had. just in an 8-day period of time. And the goal is never to go to another country and have something happen there and not happen here. The whole goal is to translate that into right here. Let me just wrap up for a second. Thanks, guys. Let me just thank these guys. They put. Let me just wrap up with just a couple of thoughts here. If you've been around the crossings very long, you probably heard me say this saying again and again, and that's this: God is always up to something, and that something always includes you. Some of us don't connect to the something God is up to, and we wonder, we're just kind of wandering around in life, but the something that God is up to, always there's something on it that has your name on it. And that always has to do with God moving us from here to there to becoming radically inclusive people. That's not the way we're born. That's not the way we live. To join with God in the redeeming and restoring of lost and broken lives. You know, it's interesting. We talked about Israel at the beginning of this talk this morning. Israel eventually lost their way because they came completely inward, and they crumbled in the dust of self-absorption. And they went off the map for a period of time. But even when they came back, they ceased to be God's driving force in the world. God moved on and did something else. And the thing that he started then was called the church. Now, it's interesting that we as a church, by the way, as you well know, are moving in very radically from a new here to there in getting a new facility. And I want to tell you one of the reasons that we're doing this. I know a lot of us think that it's going to be nicer, and it is. It's going to be more comfortable, it is. We're going to have, better places to meet, and it is. There's no questions about any of this thing. But we want to be able to finally do something that has been our goal from the very, very beginning when we started this church, and that's to be more radically inclusive. The very location we have taken is so we can be more radically inclusive of those that are around us. In many ways, over the last several years, we've been virtually invisible to the very community that we want to reach. And I want you to know that that is about to change. And for some, that change is going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you right now. For some, the change is going to be uncomfortable. You're going to say, this isn't how it used to be. Exactly. I don't ever want to be like we used to be. I want to be tracking with God in what He's doing and stretching us from here to there and here to there and here to there and here to there and here to there. I want God to be changing you. I want God to be changing me. And just as I look at people, and the very location we're in is going to be different. You know, one of the greatest Bible verses in the whole world that most everybody here knows, John 3:16, starts with these very simple but profound words, and you all know them. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that. It was a radically inclusive love for the entire world, leaving nobody out, that drove him to do what he did. A very, very radical, inclusive thing that he was willing to give his life so that nobody would perish. And I just want to say, as we close this, and we talked about what's going on in Bolivia, that as we move from here to there as a church and as individuals, it's going to mean one of the things God wants to do in your life is to have you fall more and more and more and more in love with the world that He loves. Most of us aren't there. I'm not there. You're not there. God wants us to get rid of the lines and put away the boxes and empty out the cubby holes and learn how to be so much more like He was. And when that happens, it drives you and it drives me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. See, love drives you to do crazy things. Love drives you to spend crazy money on crazy stuff. Those of us that have in relationships, you know, in those kind of relationships, you save and you buy and you sacrifice and you do things for a person that you love. That is only normal. That isn't hard to believe. And when you look at Jesus, you go, what would drive Him to give His life on a cross? Because He was radically inclusive with everybody, and it states in the New Testament it's because He wasn't willing that one person should perish. And in order to make that a reality, He had to give everything that He had to provide an opportunity that nobody would perish. And as a church, that's us. And so I just wanted to say as we close this, that here to there is a way of life as an individual and as a church. And I'm going to tell you, here to there is uncomfortable, as we've heard from right up here. It's sometimes your plans don't work out the way you think that you're going to work out when you move from here to there. Sometimes you're inconvenienced. Sometimes it costs you a loss of sleep. And sometimes it costs you a loss of money. But it costs Jesus a loss of life. And until we get there, we're still falling short. So I'm proud to be part of a group of people who are willing to move from here to there and become more radically inclusive. Now what we're going to do, band, why don't you come on up here? And I know we've gone late, and I'm going to ask you just to spend a few more minutes here, okay? Because I was thinking how we're going to end this morning. And I want to end with something that I think is so meaningful. We're going to end with communion. We're just going to do one song, and when that song is over, we'll be taking communion during that song, and when the song is over, we'll end. But when you look at communion, I don't know how many times we have said, when you look at the emblems of bread and juice, which are simply just little emblems, they are there for the purpose to remind us of how valuable you are to Jesus, that he was willing to go to this length for you because that's how special you are to him. But as we take communion this morning, I'm going to ask you to take that to one more level. Yes, do I want you to appreciate what God has done for you? Yes. But I want you to look at this bread and look at these little things of juice and think, this is what Jesus was willing to do for the people that are at your workplace, the people that are in your community, the people that are in your classrooms at school. This is how far he was willing to go. And let it remind you not only of how much God loves you, but that God wants you to become more radically inclusive with his love so other people can be a part of what he's done. That's what we're going to do, church. That's who we are. We don't want to become an inward, exclusive club, enjoying the perks of knowing Jesus, but forgetting about all the people that are lost. Jesus said to the people of Israel, don't you ever do that. Don't ever forget where you came from. Because I need you to go out there and be my hands and feet in reaching those people that are just like you. Don't leave them hopelessly lost outside your circle of wagons. Open up your circle of wagons and get out there. And as we close today with communion, I'm going to pray and then the band's going to play and ask you to come up the center aisle just for traffic flow here and go down the side and just sit there until we're done. Then we'll close together. God, thank you so much that you are a radically inclusive God who is not willing that any should perish, and because of that, we know you today. Those of us in this room, God, we are no more deserving than the people outside these walls. But somehow, God, your divine orchestration drew us to yourself. We're asking that you would just divinely orchestrate that for other people, and in the process of doing that, you divinely orchestrate for our paths to cross on streets and on soccer fields and in neighborhoods and in business environments. God, that you would use us, that we can be these kind of people that can be radically used by you to include those that are so far from you. God, thank you for this bread, and thank you for these little cups that we're going to take. We don't take them to get more of you. We get them to remind us of who you are and what you've done. And we're going to take them in remembrance of you. In Jesus' name, amen.